Well guys, here is a brand new HOI4 After Action Report, as this is the first time I finally did one as, Nationalist China. So yeah, I've tried them before several years ago and could not stop Japan. I tried them multiple times over the last few days, and every time I kept getting my ass beat by Japan. There was one game where I actually was somewhat doing good, and then all of a sudden, Communist China rose up, took over like half the territory, and then just roll stomped me. Because I had to throw everything I had to try and stop Japan barely. So after numerous tries, I eventually did a strategy where, of course, you annex most of Chinese sub-states, and this time around, I found about the free CB on Communist China, so I took care of them as quickly as possible. And I eventually took over everyone except Guangxi clicked down here because I could never get their autonomy lowered, and it really pissed me off. So eventually, Japan attacked me, and unlike all the previous times, I was able to hold them back. I led them on purpose, invaded some parts up here to spread them out, but after that, they couldn't get in. Every time they naval invaded me, I kept pushing them back, and I held that up to like 1939 or 1940. Once I built up enough industry, built up my stacks so I could get a 14-4, I eventually plowed through, took over all, eventually invaded all of like Manchukuo, moved into Korea, took all that over, and then eventually later Siam. Japan took over a whole bunch of territory down here, including invading quite deep in here before I pushed them all back, took over all that, and eventually a few years later Siam joined the Axis and we crushed them. Now, of course, for some reason, Japan no one could invade them. I couldn't navally invade them, I couldn't paratroop, and I tried both, and the Americans couldn't invade them. We were able to take over Taiwan and Okinawa, but they wouldn't give up. We couldn't invade them. And eventually I started just goofing around doing our stuff. I annexed Tibet, I invaded them, I invaded Mongolia, which was part of the communists, the Comintern, so I had to go war with the Soviet Union while they were still fighting Germany, who made it all the way past here, pretty much. So we quickly took over Mongolia, and we beat the Soviets. After a little bit, Germany beat the Soviet Union, and instead of, taking all of Russia like I would have, they only took a last bit of it right here and left us as a rump state. And once that happened, Russia gave up and I was able to take over Mongolia. And then still 1946 or 47 or something like that, we still couldn't invade Japan. No one could do anything. And then I was looking away at something else, and all of a sudden Japan gave up. I know there is that event where if the Allies took over Okinawa and then nuked 2 of Japan's victory points, they would give the option to surrender. So I guess maybe that's what happened, because I have no idea. I couldn't invade them. The Americans couldn't invade them. And I don't recall seeing any invasion ongoing at that point or anything like that. I was looking away for quite a bit, and all of a sudden, boom, they gave up. So I was able to take all of them over, yada yada, took over all their Pacific islands and all that. So yeah, that was great and all. Problem was, Germany was still active, and they controlled pretty much all of Europe, all the way out to here, for crying out loud. They actually beat the Soviet Union, now the Russian Empire. So after a little bit of prepping, it took 11 years, but we fought a long-fought war to beat Germany in the Axis, as we slowly spread out over here pretty much. And then finally is when the Allies started to they first took over Portugal, who joined the Axis. America took them over. And then eventually later on, the Allies on the Western Front occupied Netherlands, Belgium, and all that. But really, they couldn't really do much in Germany. So we just kept slowly but advancing forward. And eventually we got to the Baltic area. And that's when they really started to invade more of Germany. There was snaking across into Danzig area pretty much, as we were still moping around here. Turkey joined the Axis, and then we had the slugfest down here pretty much. And then I don't know what happened. I was looking away, and then all of a sudden, almost all of Germany was occupied by the British somehow. There was no way they could have occupied Germany that quickly from an invasion. Because Germany kept pushing them back. So I'm wondering if it was like some sort of coup that happened that automatically gave the British access or something, because I really can't see how they could have occupied like that. Like, basically, Germany had this part occupied and the southern part occupied with, like, the middle section hanging on for dear life. And when that happened, it was pretty easy. We went although we were still going slow, we quickly, but eventually plowed through and kept destroying troops. Eventually moved down here, unoccupied Greece, Turkey fell. And eventually Iraq, who joined the Axis, fell. And eventually, even though they had 0 victory points left, Germany would still not surrender after we fully occupied them and such. They took over Ireland somehow, but we eventually beat them. Then we invaded Italy. They they had their overthrow of Mussolini, so that was quick work. Then we had to defeat Axis France, Vichy France, and we won. And then the war still didn't end, because Ethiopia down here was released, and they had enough... No. France had all of this still. The Axis still had parts of these, and Ethiopia almost became a great major power of all their industry scores. So once they were pretty much done, we just moped down here. We quickly marched through, like, all the way to Egypt, and then when we got to Sudan, that's when the Axis finally fell. And that's the borders we have right now. As pretty much everyone in the world is aligned with the Allies, except for all the unaligned countries, I'm sure is mostly just South America. And there's still some fascist members, Spain, Belgium, even though they're part of the Allies somehow. And the Russian Empire is fascist, even though they have even though they're 100% communist. Great, makes good sense there. Although I view them, since I liberated most of their territory, I view them kind of like aligned with me. But in the end, most of the world is allied aligned. With, of course, the great major powers. America, of course, by Republic of China, because I became Democratic later on, because I took the option to do that. And I'm guessing the British, Germany, or Russian Empire is the great powers remaining. Alright, so of course. And, oh yeah, and my army was twice as big earlier, but I had to delete half of them to try and get some supplies back up for my invasion into, like, the Baltic. So my army's a lot smaller than it used to be. And I'm sure it hurt my final score in the end, which sucked. But yeah, that is the final results, as here we go. And there is my score. I don't know what it is with the game clipping out, like making duplicates. I've noticed that too in a previous game. I don't know why it's doing that, but yeah. Wow, the British #1. I guess all their colonies remains kept them going. I'm surprised they're #1 in a landslide. America #2, and then my China third best in the world. So yeah, very impressive. My brigades are severely smaller. Guangxi seems to have more troops than me. Bruh, is that true? Like, I don't see me anywhere. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay. Okay, I'm more in Guangxi, thankfully. Wow, Spain has more troops than me. My navy's tiny. Of course, I didn't really pay attention to the navy. I don't even see it yet. And Air Force. Surprisingly not first, because usually I am first. Yep, not third industrially, but I have the second most landmass in the world. Alright, guys. So I hope you enjoyed, and here's the final results of my Nationalist China turned to Republic of China, pretty much allied complete victory.